Everyone, back again this week with another Carpark live stream, and I nearly got to the end of the week and forgot to do one, but it is a short school week here, so we just had March break, mid-March, and we have a PD day tomorrow. So I'm doing this one before the kids are home from school again, and I have my notes with me because I don't want to miss anything, but this week I wanted to talk about some trends and patterns that I notice that you might get asked some different audience questions, or that you're going to like pique the curiosity of the audience. So I want to start off with the question for you of how comfortable do you feel with not being necessarily a subject matter expert, but maybe coming from the place of your own lived experiences and sharing your ideas around a subject? Because that is how I got started with mixing babies in business. I wasn't a venue designer necessarily. I told you a few live streams ago that I was doing event planning, public relations, marketing, but I had the experience of going into business settings, bringing my kids with me. And I actually met up with someone yesterday that I've known, I think, about 7 years now. So I met him whenever I was pregnant with our second son, and our second son turned 7 this summer. So kind of crazy to think it's been 7 years, but I was very pregnant when I was doing this contract at this consulting company where he was also working. And now we both have 3 boys. Mine are all under the age of 9. His are under the age of 6. But yeah, kind of crazy that time is flying. But I have used my lived experiences over the last almost 9 years now, more than 9 if you count pregnancy, of going to events, going to conferences, going to workshops, going to webinars, and sometimes not necessarily going to them, but opting out of them because I couldn't go to them because they were at 7 a.m., 8 a.m., or 4 p.m. to 6 p.m., that kind of thing, or during school pickup time. So first off, just want you to kind of like do a gut check or a sense check of how comfortable are you with being a contributor or like a non-subject matter expert, but someone who has lived experience that might be validated by somebody else or recognized by someone else, also experienced by someone else, that can help other people. And how comfortable are you with bringing those to an audience? Because the first trend I've noticed is, this is a bonus for if you want to do pitching and public speaking. It also applies, as I've found, it also applies to government relations and public relations. So I have a background in public relations, but I didn't have a background in government relations until, I guess you could say, like 5 years ago. But these skills apply not just to public speaking, but you can use them for advocacy. You can use them for pitching to the media, sharing your story. But the first thing I want you to consider is your audience. Who are you speaking to? So are you coming to a B2B audience? Are you speaking to a B2C, like business to business, business to consumer? Because if you're entering a space as a speaker or a thought leader or someone who has a different opinion about a subject matter, if it's traditionally, for example, a business to consumer audience, so you could say like parents buying strollers, business to consumer, but you're talking about this subject in a business to, maybe this is a bad example. I'll say, my stuff was about targeted at business to consumer people. So like people who are parents buy a lot of new parenting stuff. They need strollers, they need cribs, they need diaper bags, they need diapers, nappies, cloth diapers, food supplies, different things depending on how you're feeding your baby. And I was bringing that audience to a startup space, to a business workshop space that typically wasn't really advertised openly. Come on in, come join us for this startup workshop. So I was taking people who traditionally were used to being, I guess, consumers, and not all of them would have necessarily identified as business owners off the bat. They might have just been curious about learning more about business. They might have been curious about learning about flexible work and remote work. And I took my background in doing those things and doing service-based business to connect parents with other business service providers and business experts to learn new topics. So it was bringing a different audience into a different space. when it came to my public speaking engagements, same thing applied. So one of the audiences that I spoke to over the years was an audience of software developers or plugin developers for WordPress or users of WordPress. I attended the WordPress WordCamp conference. I believe it was summer 2019. So my baby was a year old. My oldest was 3. And I did a mini talk on creating more inclusive business spaces for parents. And then I did a couple hours workshop on how I've used WordPress to start a blog, to validate a business idea, and to build an audience. And so I didn't expect the audience necessarily to be super engaged in the first mini talk that I did that was around creating more inclusive business spaces and experiences. But what was interesting was at the end of that talk, which was probably about 15 minutes. Sorry, I'm just going to change arms here. I didn't bring my tripod thing. That talk was about 10-15 minutes. And the person who came up to me one of the people that came up to me at the end was someone who is a website or head website lead for a government party here in Canada. And his partner was expecting their first baby. And they just thanked me for sharing my story, sharing my experiences, and kind of informing them as a partner. I'm just going to increase the light here. As a partner of what their realities would be whenever they became parents. So they were like, thank you so much for sharing this perspective and these insights, because I had no idea that these are things that they might experience with a newborn, or that they might experience going into business settings, and I'm going to be able to support them better now whenever we have our baby. So I was going into an audience of B2B service providers or business professionals who typically work in service industry, like in IT or tech, talking about bringing babies into business settings. Didn't necessarily think they were my ideal audience, but they had questions, they were engaged, and they were listening. And you'd be surprised what the feedback will be. So the first one I want you to consider for this week with trends that I've noticed that you're going to have a bit more feedback from your audience is if you're taking a topic from another industry and you're introducing it to an audience that maybe isn't their usual water cooler conversation. So you want to consider, are they B2B, B2C, business to business, business to consumer? What industry are they in? So that example was tech, business, software. And where are they based? So you could be speaking to an audience that some of their problems maybe won't be as relatable, or they might not be aware of them. So for example, parents who live in areas that don't have a lot of daycare options or facilities are going to have different issues or problems with navigating flexible work than parents who are in an urban center, who have subsidized childcare like we do in Canada right now, who have access to family or neighborhood connections, their own village of support. So you want to consider who is the audience that you're speaking to, and what is their current reality? Where are they based? What's their industry? What does their day-to-day life look like? What career stage or life stage are they at? So I wasn't necessarily choosing an event based on the fact that I thought there'd be lots of parents there at this WordCamp conference. I was trying to reach a new audience that may have impact more widely, but also I had been using WordPress for years, and I wanted to just share my story about how I had used that platform and organically grown a following, shared my story, and over time had used their tools, their measurement tools, to hone in on topics that people were interested in and to provide additional resources for my readers. And lastly, for your audience, you want to look at like not only what the problems that they're facing, but what are their motivations for being there. So are they there for inspiration? Are they there for education? Are they there for awareness? Are they there for professional development points with their company? Are they there to upskill? You want to think about the motivations that your audience is having by attending your talk. So if it's a keynote or a lightning talk or a panel, you might want to focus on inspiration and awareness. if it is a workshop format, a webinar format, and it's part of upskilling or professional development or CPD, continuous professional development credits, you want to give them takeaways. You want to give them education and give them something to leave with. So you will want to structure your talk to the audience, but also be mindful of the fact that they might not be living your lived experience, and it's your job as a presenter, as a speaker, as someone pitching to like zoom them right into this is my reality right now. And there's a few different ways to do that, but for now I want to leave you with that one. So focusing on your audience is the tip for this week, and looking at all the different ways that you can introduce what your expertise is or your lived experience is or your offering is to a new audience, a different audience, an audience that maybe has never heard of what you're doing but would be curious about it or able to contribute in some positive way to working with you or making a difference through working with you. And yeah, just getting creative with how you can apply a new spin or a new slant on that. So I hope you're having a great week. It is officially 19 degrees right now. It's afternoon in Ottawa, Canada. As of the weekend, it was minus 11 Celsius. So it's gone up like 30 degrees Celsius in a couple days. So this is Eastern Ontario life. So the grass is starting to turn green. Snow is still on the ground, slowly melting, and we're getting ready for another long weekend with PD Day here. So I hope you're doing well, and I'll be back on next week sharing another tip for trends and patterns that I've noticed might pique your audience's curiosity more and get you some interesting questions and follow up on the topics that you're sharing on. So thanks for listening. Take care.